Hey, so we're going to be making chicken soup. I have already prepped most of the stuff, so let's just go ahead and dive into it. I like to start with a couple tablespoons of butter. I prefer using butter over oil to start because I think that it is more flavorful. And we are going to have a big old stock pot. This is actually, I think this is a 12 quart. I usually use like an 8 quart, but big is good. So this is 3 diced carrots, 3 diced celery stalks, a whole onion diced, half of it in bigger and half of it in smaller sections, sliced mushrooms, and half of a bunch of chopped parsley. Alright, and I hear that butter getting nice and hot, so in with the onions. There we go. Just gonna stir, move them around a little. Alright, now normally when I'm cooking, this is the time when I dump the onions in and then I move over and I slice the mushrooms, but because the mushrooms are pre-sliced, all I gotta do is open them up. Mushrooms. Alright, so mushrooms go in, and this is it makes a ton of soup. Pretty much I usually make this soup and then proceed to eat it for at least a week's worth of lunches and like 3 or 4 dinners for 2 adults. So as you heat this stuff, you start on high heat at the beginning. You're going to reduce that, but as this stuff cooks down, it's going to cook a bunch of liquid out. So I'm probably going to end up adding some oil to this, but for right now, it's okay. Alright, so got the celery and carrots. And so as you're cooking, pretty much this should kind of smell like a Thanksgiving dinner. I also usually like to add some sage and marjoram, and I really usually love using paprika, but I did not have paprika here, so I got kind of a different variety of spices to add in. So we're going to let that settle down a bit before I add in some oil and the parsley. So we're going to let that cook for a sec. Alright, so I'm going to just add some olive oil in here, and your goal is just to keep things from getting like too crispy. You want it like you're cooking till the onions are translucent, but you don't want things getting too browned or heated. So also at this stage, if you wanted to, before you start adding the chicken or more liquid, you could throw in a few tablespoons of flour to make like a thicker broth, a more stew-like broth. Throw it in at this stage instead of later so that it doesn't clump, and throw it in a couple tablespoons at a time, or a tablespoon or 2 at a time, until everything's sort of coated and it becomes a gravy when you end up finishing up. Since things are starting to cook in, it's time that we can start adding some spices, and I've got a basil, oregano, garlic, and sea salt combo, and you're just gonna add a ton of spices, just a lot of spices. So some more garlic. Like I said, I like paprika in it, but I don't have any paprika, so some white pepper, which should be nice to make it nice and spicy, actually. A little more salt. Need lots of salt to make the flavor good. And parsley. If you don't have fresh parsley, like dried parsley is also fine, but fresh parsley is really good. And again, this is half a bunch, so it's kind of a lot of parsley, but this is going to be a lot of soup. So, and then just sort of go ahead and stir it in, and you can kind of see at the bottom there some of the liquid is cooking out. So I have added a little bit of olive oil. Alright, so again, we just kind of keep it moving until the onions are a little bit more translucent, and after that we're going to be browning the chicken in. Okay, so I've gone ahead and tossed the chicken in. It is 1.5 pounds of cubed chicken thighs. And thighs taste better than breasts. So that's what you're gonna want to toss in. If you've got chicken breasts, that's fine. Whatever you want to make sure that like you can trim the fat a little, but leave plenty of fat in, because that's going to cook down and render into the soup and taste incredible. So yeah, just kind of stir that around and cook it until the chicken is starting to get like white on the outside. So we'll show that in a second. Alright, you can see that some of the chicken, like this chunk here, is starting to get white on the outside, which is good. I just wanted to explain the reason that you brown the chicken is because if you don't, it gets like pretty rubbery when you're done with it. So you brown up the chicken and make sure it's white on the outside first before you start adding the water in. Because if you just cook it in the water, it's going to end up kind of stringy and rubbery as opposed to like nice and tender. Okay, so the chicken is mostly white on the outside, so that means that the hard part of all of this is over, and the rest of it is just adding water, boiling, adding salt, and tasting. So I don't really measure the water that I add. I just, however many cups it takes. So at home I've got like a big, whatever it is, 1 quart, 1 quart measuring cup, and it takes 2.5 to 3 of those typically. Oops, spilling a little. And how much water you add depends on how thick you like your soup. I like my soup to have like a fair amount of broth, but like not a ton of broth. So I like it to be like a little more than swimming, but we're also going to add rice later. So you're going to need room for the rice to absorb some liquid, but like still leave some leftover broth so it's not just like rice and chicken. So that's looking about right. Go ahead and give it a stir. And yeah, I may add a little bit more water to that. Okay, so that's about where we end up. And if you stir it, you can see that like it's still really, really clear. That's gonna change as it cooks. Like it's gonna get a nice, good, rich, kind of golden color to it as it finishes. So what you do now is like while it's on high, bring the entire pot to a boil. So we'll come back when it's boiling. Keep an eye on it. Alright, so come back and the soup is boiling, which is good because it means that the chicken is cooked. So at this point your chicken should be fully cooked. Let's see, fish out a chunk. Yeah, that is all cooked. So basically the rest of this is just, we're going to reduce the temperature to low, like the lowest possible setting, and just let it simmer to let the flavors mix for a couple hours. So there we go, down to low. You can see that things like kind of start to billow. And you put a lid on, and because this lid does not have a hole, slightly offset. So you can see the steam coming out, but you don't want it completely sealed because you don't want it to like pop or anything. So okay, we'll keep checking back in, and that's after this point. It's basically you check every half hour. So, all right, 20 minutes, half hour, or something like that. There we go.